School Board. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Cybulski,
Here.
Mrs. Krieg,
Here.
Mrs. Milliken Dixon,
Here.
Mrs. Ortiz,
Present.
and Mr. Pierson.
Here.
Are we in compliance,
Yes,
Mr.
we are.
Lillie? Okay, the Assistant Superintendent, the Substitute Superintendent recommends the approval of the enclosed Personnel Services Agreement with Ron Donatone to perform certain services as an independent contractor for the board. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Discussion? So a couple of blanks we have to fill in, just FYI. We have to fill in the date, because we weren't sure what day this would be, so it's 4/11/24. And we have to fill in the hourly rate.
And the effective date.
And the effective date, excuse me, did I skip one? Effective date will be today as well, right?
Well, when is he going to start work?
When are you starting working? What do we decide? Tomorrow?
If this is approved, I have a meeting with Mr. Donatone tomorrow morning.
So tomorrow.
All
All right, so April 12th. Effective April 12th, and runs until such time as Mr. Riley deems it necessary to conclude this agreement. So hourly rate, we discussed at our last executive session, 125. Is everybody okay with that? Mr. Donatone, are you still in agreement with that? So we'll add 125 an hour for each hour, and the rest of it is completed and outlined. So, roll call, please.
Mrs. Cybulski,
Yes.
Mrs. Krieg,
Yes.
Mrs. Milliken Dixon,
Yes,
Mrs. Ortiz,
Yes.
and Mr. Pierson.
Yes.
motion passes. So, Mr. Donatone, what we're gonna do is replace this top. We'll have you sign this right now if you'd like to. Wanna come on up and sign? Then we're gonna replace this top sheet with a clean one that's got the, not my handwriting, but typing. He has had, okay, he has had the opportunity to look it over and read it, and is agreeing to it. Thanks. Mr. Donatone comes to us with many, many years, couple years of education administrative experience. And so we are glad to have him. Welcome, thank you, Mr. Donatone. Welcome, welcome.
Glad to be here.
Thank you. We are hoping that Mr. Donatone will fill in the gaps that have been unfilled, I guess, during Dr. Treehorn's absence on her leave. So Mr. Riley has been courageously juggling both jobs, and we don't want him to have to do that anymore. So Mr. Donatone's gonna come in and be the assistant to the substitute superintendent or whatever, independent contractor, and help navigate that and fill in any of those things. All right, thank you all. Next on the agenda, we have the board president recommends that the board accept the investigator's investigative report stemming from the board policy 3362, investigation authorized by the board at its December 20th, 2023 meeting, and that the board grant authority to the board president and treasurer to carry out any actions necessary to accomplish and address the board's acceptance of the investigator's report, including but not limited to providing notice to parties of investigation results. Can I get a motion? Second? Any discussion?
So just to note, the investigator found for the above reasons, I find no support for the allegations that the November 2023 newsletter violated board policy 3362.01.
Right. Thank you, Mrs. Ortiz. Yes, the investigator found Dr. Treehorn had not in fact written things in a threatening nature, and that her statements were well within her purview as superintendent. So that's what that investigation results were. And so can we get a roll call, please?
Mrs. Krieg,
Yes.
Mrs. Milliken Dixon,
Yes.
Mrs. Ortiz,
Yes.
Mr. Pierson,
Abstain.
and Mrs. Cybulski.
Yes.
Okay. Investigator report accepted. Anything else for the good of the order? I need a motion to adjourn the meeting. Second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Milliken Dixon.
Yes.
Mrs. Ortiz.
Yes.
Mr. Pierson.
Yes.
Mrs. Cybulski.
Yes.
And Mrs. Krieg.
Yes.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you all.